I've been kind of feeling a little down, a little blue lately. I really, ever since I read that op-ed out of the Bee about how like the mayor dunked on all the activists and like basically people who like care about shit like rent control or whatever. Like we got smacked down super hard by city council and the mayor.
The way the Bee worded it was that he schooled Sacramento activists.
Right. And ever since I got schooled like that, I've been feeling really blue. And Dave, is there like, do you have anything to cheer me up, man? Any news that might turn this frown upside down?
Here we
go. Actually last night, a little fishy when I was at the river told me that Flo, stop making me laugh. That an appeals court judge had overturned the court decision to keep real rent control off the ballot. So it is now going to be on the November ballot.
That is fantastic news. That improves my mood tenfold.
This, I'm 99% sure Gill Duran wrote that like editorial board piece because he really has it in for a lot of the demonstrators, and especially in for Michelle Parasette, who is the whole reason that we're actually going to be able to vote on real rent control.
Yes.
So I'm just so happy to say, Gill, Daryl, you just got schooled.
You got schooled, guys.
Oh, hey.
Can I also just take a moment to say how Michelle has not been given an opportunity to be able to respond in the Bee, which is like a typical courtesy that's offered when you are named in an opinion piece. And I just think that's an incredibly poor taste. And so, yes, Gill does not add his name to the byline in part because he's a bit of a coward. And I just want that to kind of be on the record that that's not cool. It's not professional. And the fact that the Bee hasn't bothered to write another opinion editorial about this is really telling about just how deeply, not just partisan is fine, but how deeply unethical this particular part of their reporting is. And I'm incredibly disappointed.
Did they react to this news at all? Like no. I went on and was looking for any mention of this today, and I didn't spend a ton of time on it, but I didn't see shit.
Yeah, well, the news and the editorial board are two different sort of spaces in the opinion section, right? But I didn't see a straight news piece today, which surprised me. The News and Review picked it up. Foon Rhee wrote a piece over there. But I saw nothing from any other outlet in our region, which really surprised me. And I was like, is that because Voices River City broke it? It's just not good enough now?
Yeah, that must be it.
Yeah.
I think they're probably, I mean, I want to give some of them at least maybe the benefit of the doubt that, given that there was this announcement this week about who our vice presidential candidate is going to be, that may have sucked up a lot of the energy and time of our journalistic staff.
That is a very good point.
So I'm going to hope that that's it, because there are some major scandals happening in our region that have gotten some coverage, but they need even more coverage. And so I do want to give, as much as I want to, really criticize Gill for being unethical here, I also want to give a major shout out to the Bee for actually removing the paywall of the article that was written about what happened at the County Board of Supervisors meeting, because I thought that was really important to make sure people have access to it. So
that's good. Well, that's the editorial.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, the straight news side, they've got a lot of good people on the straight news side, but their editorial board is a real fucking problem. And it really starts and ends with Gill Duran. He's a politician. He was the press secretary for Governor Brown. And he I don't know. This isn't his background, so maybe he's not used to sort of the ins and outs of this. But it feels like the original piece he wrote, talking about schooling Michelle. And honestly, I think he was kind of spiking the football on Katie Valenzuela and on you, Flo. And it was just like, it just seemed like a very petty thing for the head of an editorial board to do.
I mean, he was probably more spiking the football on them than me because they are the bigger names in all of this. But
you still think that, huh?
Yeah, I'm just part of the
Cute.
Huh.
I was one of the I'm not one of the intended activists. I'm just one of the like loudmouth people in the chorus, right? Who gets like the smoke along with everybody else. So I mean, yeah, definitely we take it personally, but it wasn't like I'm gonna get that flow. Like, nobody cares that much.
All right. Well,
We all have to find a way to sleep somehow.
Shut up, Shannon.
To the point of the rent control thing, so this is a huge win because it looked like we were kind of hosed and that city council and the mayor were going to be successful in their bid to keep this thing off the November ballot, even though it got like 47,000 signatures or something along those lines.
yeah, closer
like,
to 44, I guess, because some didn't. Yeah, but still.
I got to drop that 47,000 figure then. So 44,000 signatures, still a considerable amount,
more
in
than
my opinion.
needed.
I still think 47 can be reported because that's the number of people who like tried. Some of them didn't completely fill out their addresses and whatever else. And so that may not have been what it qualified as, but that's the number of people who said, I think this is a good idea and I'm going to sign on. Right. We got to honor that.
So, for those who are not as familiar with the situation, the mayor and city council, and I think Hansen came up with some like goofy ass bullshit ass rent control thing as a counter proposal. And then once they had that through, we're like, okay, good. Well, that's solved. We can throw out this other one that got all these signatures. Michelle Parasette was not into that idea. So this, like, now there's been like a lawsuit levied against her. Yesterday, yes, like Dave said, a judge ruled that they have to allow it onto the ballot. So tonight we fucking celebrate because that is a giant win and there's a lot of people who have been working hella hard to get this thing through onto the ballot.
Yeah, a lot of renters organizations, renters' rights, a lot of labor folks, SAC, DSA, they work tirelessly on this. So kudos to all of you. And kudos, obviously, to Michelle Parasette, who, Gill Duran and, Steve Hansen and others in City Hall really tried to end her career.
Right.
And this is
came out with that lawsuit win. like last month, like right in the middle of like a whole bunch of other awful shit that was happening.
Of the National Guard being
right. Yeah,
the
exactly.
National Guard was called in. Yep.
Fucking.
So,
anyway,
like, I know we're going a little long. I just also want to say, if you read that piece about Daryl schooling people, it's the arguments are so nonsensical, and Gill wrote something about like the voters deciding something, and it's like, Gill, the voters decide if you give them options, like,
right? Exactly,
like a rent control ballot measure. So
to that point, I want to state explicitly that like tonight we celebrate because this is a huge win, but tomorrow we fucking go back to work because this thing is by no means over. We still have to fucking push this thing through in November. And in order for that to happen, a lot of us have to hit the ground and really go to work. So let's get ready for that. We've got a big fight in front of us. It is by no means is this fight even close to over.
And while we're doing breaking news and thinking about letting the people decide, the Democratic Party tonight decided that they are not going to endorse the strong mayor proposal.
Right.
So
the county Dems?
DP, is it?
It's probably the county, and they're very progressive. Yeah.
So that also happened tonight. There's so many Democratic clubs that I'm always like, which one?
Yeah.
I gotta think about it. But
these are the ones that kicked Eric Guerra and Steve Hansen out because they endorsed Anne Marie Schubert, and we can talk about her later tonight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite person ever.
All right. Well, you guys want to let's get it going. You guys ready?
Let's get it going. Claws up for all the good stuff.
Claws up, and all the good stuff that is yet to come.
Yes. Organized fight.
I don't have a koozie yet, YouTube, so I'm just gonna use my blue nail polish to be in solidarity with the Voices color scheme.
Close enough.
That's good. I like it.
All right, let's get this started. Let's get this thing started.
Cool.
Okay.
That was good.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard.
everyone. You have Kempa.
And Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And a very special guest in our friend Alana Mathews. How you doing, Alana?
Hi, I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
We're super excited to have you. You're a fellow Nelper, so Flo and I were both in Nehemiah. I believe you're class 2.
Yes,
so you've got
I am.
seniority on us.
Deuces.
Yeah. But you know, you're doing a lot of cool stuff right now, and we thought it would be really great to have you on and talk about some of the community justice work you're doing. So number one, you're the founder of the Community Justice Collaborative, and you're also an adjunct professor at McGeorge School of Law. Why don't we start with the Community Justice Collaborative? Tell us what that is and how it began.
Yeah, so the Community Justice Collaborative is actually work that I think I've probably been doing for the last 15 years since I've been in Sacramento, but decided to make it a more formalized title, I guess, in organization. And it's really about making justice and the law more accessible to everyday citizens. I am a former deputy district attorney. And so as a former prosecutor, you know, I didn't live in a gated community. I lived in South Sacramento, right on Valley High Drive. And a lot of people in the community, I've always been very active. You know, they would still call me and say, hey, this is what's going on. What do I need to do? Or they would say, you know, I have a public defender. Should I actually get a, you know, private attorney? So there were always these questions around criminal justice that people would look to me to kind of help guide them or just give them some information. And then I started working with the Florida Law Academy. I'm currently still the advisory chair. And we started putting on a host of community clinics for the residents in the Florida area in South Sacramento. Everything from, you know, probate or wills, because people think, oh, I don't have a lot of money. Why do I need a will? But you'd be surprised. People fight over your socks once you're gone. Or there's a lot of other things. So we did employment law, landlord-tenant law. There was just so much that, you know, people don't really think about a lawyer until they actually need one. And then they may not afford one. So they wind up just calling someone that they know or saying, oh, my cousin, sister, brother-in-law asked, you know, this question. So I've spent a lot of my career just kind of helping guide people. And now with everything that's going on, the need is greater than ever to make the law more accessible.
Absolutely.
So that is what kind of bore life to the Community Justice Collaborative, is to create a platform where we can make the law accessible. So we have volunteer attorneys who, in this age of COVID, we do Zoom calls, and we have educational clinics. So I shouldn't say Zoom calls, they're educational clinics that are kind of like in a webinar format. And we have things like Know Your Rights seminar, looking at immigration, what does DACA mean now with the new ruling. We also look at the intersection of disability and incarceration.
Wow.
And so whatever attorneys, you know, are willing to provide their expertise, I'm happy that we now have a partnership with Mutual Assistance. And so there's a greater need outside of kind of criminal justice, but just simple things like, you know, what is dependency court? If I'm trying to reunify with my children, what does that mean? Juvenile Justice 101, you know, where do I start if my kid has, you know, been arrested and taken to juvenile hall, and what is it that we can expect? So we're starting out being responsive to the community and not just saying, okay, here's the information and you take it, but we're asking, what is it that the community needs?
Yeah.
And this sort of ties in with my work as a professor at McGeorge School of Law, because I am preparing to teach a course called Racial Justice and Equity, and it's going to be a practicum. And it's going to be an opportunity to pair law students with social justice organizations, so that when there is protest, when there is activism, there's actually some legal input and guidance. So if there needs to be legislation, perhaps, or some other type of regulatory action that can be taken, we can support the grassroots efforts. And with McGeorge being in the heart of Oak Park, I think that's a great underused resource. But they have also not, they've been looking for ways to become more involved in the community. So I think my course and the Community Justice Collaborative is a way to kind of create that synergy and a platform to start making things happen.
This is fascinating to me because none of this sounds like the extracurricular work of a former deputy district attorney. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Well, you know what? It's because of where I grew up. I'm from Gary, Indiana, very high crime area. Even as a deputy district attorney, I spent as much time in the community as I did in the courtroom. And that's always been just kind of central to who I am and what I wanted to do and be. And I think the best prosecutors are not one-dimensional. They're not just looking at crime and punishment, but they're focused on public safety and justice.
You're blowing my mind right now. Can I ask, how many years did you spend with the district attorney's office?
About 8 years. So I interned for a couple years there, and then I passed the bar. I actually left and went to work for the Attorney General's office. But there's something called trial advocacy. And, there are different types of attorneys, but if you're good in the courtroom, that's really the only gig in town. And so all my supervisors at the AG's office said no, because they called me when I left after I interned and went to the AG's office. They called me and said, we really would like you to consider coming back and making a career. And everyone said, you should really go and do that because that's the only gig in town. So
can I ask what it is like working in a district attorney's office when you do the work that you do in terms of community justice?
It was challenging at times. There was actually a time when a supervisor pulled me aside and said, you're doing too much in the community. And I think I was a little bit before my time. The funny thing is, I'll tell you this funny story real quick. Before I graduated from law school, I was kind of imposturing as I was an attorney, but not in a bad way. Let's
not get your bar revoked here.
Well, I'll explain it to you. So I was a part of this program called Volunteers in Parole, and they pair attorneys with parolees to help them transition. So I wasn't quite an attorney yet, but I was a mentor because my big sister in law school sort of said, Alana, you would be great just from all the other work that I see that you're doing. And so I got hired and started in May at the DA's office. And just so happened, Jan Scully was, I think, on the board, or maybe she was the keynote of their luncheon. And she said, I realized I got an award because we were like, me and my mentor, we were Mentor of the Year. So as I was up there to get my award, I hadn't even been sworn in as a deputy DA. So she swore me in right on the spot in front of everybody. And they thought it was a really cool moment in the picture. But that just shows you, like, even from my first day starting as a deputy DA, I had a broader focus of what justice meant. And it was challenging at times. And for the entire time that I was a volunteer in that program, I was the only deputy DA. And so it made for kind of a weird experience when we would all get together and they would find out she's a prosecutor, but my mentee stood up for me. It's like, no, she's cool though. She's really cool. And so yeah, it was challenging at times, but it's just fundamental to who I am. So I persevered.
Were there ever instances where there were people in the community that you were helping, sort of consulting with, that were being prosecuted by some colleagues?
So, no.
Okay.
There were times when there were victims on a case that it involved a family and it was a very serious crime, rape. And the victim really had a hard time supporting the victim and also the defendant, because she had a very close relationship with both. And she called me up. So as an attorney, anyone who is represented by an attorney, you cannot, speak to them. That would be a violation of the ethical rules. So I would not ever give, I would say, like, if I'm helping out, I would never give them legal advice, or I would not ever consult with them. But it was pretty much people just wanted an assurance, like, should I get my own attorney, or should I have an attorney? And even now, when people call me, if I know that they are represented, I'm still an attorney, so I'm still going to abide by that.
Right.
But there were several times when, that's the thing about being a victim of a crime. You still live in the same neighborhood. You wake up every day, and the dynamics of that are not always, really appreciated. And it's really hard for someone to put a loved one in the system. They think they're being, disloyal. But sometimes it is appropriate. Right. And I would always assure, so this one particular time that I'm thinking about, they weren't being prosecuted by a colleague, but they were certainly, and the colleague was having a very difficult time because they weren't calling, returning the phone calls. And I said, well, you have to stop looking at this as, this is my victim for my crime of my case I'm going to prosecute. This is a 14-year-old girl and her mother, and their life is now being torn apart.
Right.
And, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
So, Alana, I think that this is really interesting because you're talking about sort of how the complexities of dealing in criminal justice. And so, because you're on the podcast and because of the work that you're doing, I really want to ask a question that has come up a lot since we've been talking about defunding the police. And it's come up in terms of, people who have been victims of crime, in particular Black women, have said, I am in support of this cause, but I was the victim of domestic violence. And the person who was my perpetrator was a Black man, for example. And I had real concerns about calling the police, but I needed help. And I think you're highlighting some of the issues around, how do we sensitively deal with the multiple dynamics of, like, recognizing what's happening and also protecting women, because we've had over 500 Black women be killed, to really know, press or attention. And so I'm really curious about sort of how you navigated this space, because you are a person who cares about social justice, and you're also participating in, a system and prosecuting people who we all know are disproportionately poor and people of color and, traumatized and, system impacted and, experiencing mental health illness and substance use and all of those things. So how did you go about navigating, right, this dynamic where you're participating in a system that you're also kind of fighting to, in some ways, maybe not dismantle, but at least restructure?
So again, going back to what I said before, that I think my work as an effective prosecutor was just as important in the community as it was in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I used to always tell people is, you want to see me on this side. And so that's the side where we're trying to be proactive and we're doing preventive services. At the point where you have violated someone else, I think that's a greater harm, just as any injustice by whatever system or agency or institution is put in place. And being a Black woman myself, sometimes it's hard to get that advocacy. We're always bearing the brunt of everything and we're carrying the weight of everything. And we have to have a system that, protects everybody. And that means protecting the most vulnerable, the most abused, and that means Black women. So what I try to do is try to be proactive in the space that I could be. So in communities, talking about domestic violence, I spend a lot of time, I've been a volunteer attorney for WEAVE. I spent a lot of time in high school because there was a time when we were starting to see domestic violence incidents, rise up, and just letting young ladies know it's not okay that's not a sign of love that he hits you or grabs you and pulls you away from someone. And then also letting young ladies know, like, guess what? You can't slap your boyfriend if he's talking to somebody else, because that is a form of battery. And even among adults, we see that because, there's kind of the misconception. A lot of women get arrested too for domestic violence because they may scratch or hit, and then when the cops show up, they only see marks on one person, the other party's going to jail. So the way I balance that is try to really be proactive. And that's why I spent so much time in the community trying to demystify like what the criminal justice system really is, and saying, this is why you need to critically think about decisions and choices and actions that you take. Because once that bell is rung, you can't unring it. And even if you've intimidated your partner to the point that they're not going to call, your neighbors can call. They can hear what's going on. And it was really, really important for me to make sure that I spent that time in the community as a way of trying to prevent that type of balance. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm trying to do as well with the Community Justice Collaborative. Because if people are empowered and they know what their rights are as a tenant, as an employee, it's an empowering position to be in, so you can avoid a lawsuit. You're not reacting to someone who has just treated you unfairly. You've already started building your case. You know that, okay, if I'm experiencing this kind of treatment on my job, I need to start logging. I need to start keeping this information. I need to not have conversations. I need to follow up with an email. So it's a way of empowering our citizenry so that they can achieve a level of justice, no matter what arena they are in. And, as I've built this partnership with like mutual assistance and in other organizations, it's like greater and greater and greater and greater needs. Right now, I've only identified about 7 organizations that I can have law students, partner with when I start my course next year. But there are so many other areas where the need is so great. And so I feel like even as we have these complex conversations, if we have a presence that is preventive, it will help us navigate more efficiently for the overall outcome of justice or public safety.
So Sacramento is the town of Stephon Clark, of Joseph Mann, of Daryl Richards. Obviously police violence is really it's one of the major things we're all talking about today. What was it like, I guess, being on the side of the district attorney's office, in an office where, well, currently the current DA has never prosecuted a cop for a death. And then on the other end, with your current work with the Community Justice Collaborative, what sort of things are you doing as far as like know your rights or, things regarding interaction with police?
So we host monthly community clinics. They're educational clinics, and present information about know your rights. If there's an encounter, if you're encountering police officers in a public place, or if you're encountering them in your home. And a public place could be on the street, or it could be in your car. So we make that information accessible. I also have a partnership with the Wiley Manual Bar Association. There's not so much know your rights, but that organization does an expungement clinic. And so I work with them, and there have been a couple of times over the years that we have had also the Know Your Rights seminar. And that's really helpful for young people too. We do have a lot of undocumented families, so there is another version that's not just about making sure you get out alive, but really understanding what information you're required to provide to police officers or ICE agents.
Yeah, it looks like I'm on your website right now. It looks like you've got 2 two of these coming up in August or this month, I guess. Have either of these already happened? It looks like one of them is
Yes.
consequences of police encounters, including a protest for the undocumented community member. Has that already happened, or is that coming
No,
up?
that's coming up.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that this kind of work is extremely timely. Yeah, I don't know. This is a really good list. I think we definitely need to link to this for the show notes tomorrow. But it looks like there is a ton of really, really useful and handy information coming up a few times a month for the foreseeable future here. So,
why don't you tell us what is coming up, and if people want to learn more, what sort of things you've got in the pipeline for them?
So again, I think it's really important to be responsive. So on our website, we have a place where you can submit information. So if there's something that someone says, hey, I really want to know about this, let me know. I'm about to be evicted. I don't know what my rights are. I had a moratorium. Submit that to us. And that's my job, is to find an attorney who is willing to donate their time and do a cursory overview. In the month of August, and this is all dependent on my volunteer attorney schedule, we really wanted to do a series with an immigration attorney, Tiffany Sharp, who is in the area. So she's decided to do kind of a one-on-one on DACA, and then also for anyone who's at a protest. So those are two classes that Skylar just mentioned. And we also want to focus on disability and incarceration and look at the intersectionality of that. So we also, which is not on there because I believe that's going to take us into October, but that will be focusing on juvenile dependency and how the dependency court system works, and what sort of things that parents should be looking for, or what the court looks for when it comes to reunification. And we will also do a juvenile justice kind of one-on-one, what the juvenile justice system looks like, kind of understanding the difference when a minor can be charged as an adult or as a juvenile, and going through the process, like, how are you rated, and what is a detention hearing, and what does a detention hearing determine, and what are the questions you're going to be asked, and what kind of information. It's unfortunate. This isn't thankfully happening in Sacramento, but there was a case in Michigan where a 15-year-old girl was on probation and she didn't do her homework. It was online. She couldn't focus. So the judge wound up putting her back in jail.
Wow.
Just for not doing her homework. And there are all these other children. I mean, who gets taken out of their home? And it's just an instance where, I think that was a bad decision of the judge, but certainly
really
to be able to help to be able to help the parent and find out what are the resources available for me, and probably even educate the teacher, because I wonder who reported that. Who calls up a probation officer or reports to the court that someone didn't do their homework so that they can be taken out of their home?
Can we talk
about have nothing else to do?
Yeah. You're bringing up juvenile justice. Can we talk about a bill that's coming up? Because I think there's obviously this larger cultural movement that is bringing us in one direction towards decarceration, reimagining what public safety funding looks like, and basically ending our for-profit prison system. California used to be very much a law and order state, and now in recent years we're starting to back up on that with Props 47 and Prop 57. Let's talk a little bit about Prop 20, which is coming up in the November ballot. Flo, do you think you could give a rundown of that?
Sure. And I'm sure Alana could probably do it as well. So,
I know, but we're going to have Alana talking a lot, so I'd hand it off.
Sure. So I think a little bit of context is warranted on this one, just because this really is sort of a clapback bill, if you will. And I say that because there were, several years ago, I believe it was 2015 2014, there was when Prop 47 was passed, and I'm not exactly remembering the year of Prop 57, but it was around sort of that same time frame.
2016.
It was 16. Okay, so they came kind of right back to back, and they were both passed as a way for us to really push forward this notion that we did not want there to be equity issues in terms of how we were prosecuting things, and we also didn't want to have people serving time or serving the consequences of criminal prosecution for low-level, non-violent, non-sexual offenses. And one of the talking points of the campaign then was like one of the most shoplifted items are diapers and baby formula. And so when we're thinking about that, these are not crimes of luxury.
Watches, yeah.
Right. These are crimes of need, right? These are very expensive items that are necessities for new parents. And so that's why they're often shoplifted. And so what it did was Prop 47 basically took these things that were called wobbler crimes, right? Which, depending on which judge you got, depending on, what else was happening around the circumstances of your crime, you could either be charged with a felony or a misdemeanor. It wobbled. And as we know of our criminal justice system, it often wobbled to the more punitive side if you were browner or poorer, and if you were, did not have your own sort of paid private representation. And if you did, and you were whiter and more wealthy, your crimes tended to be more likely to be charged as misdemeanors. And so this was an example of taking out the judgment from that decision and making it the lower level, right? So we often talk about the importance of making sure that we can add nuance to things. But if we're not going to add nuance, we should make them less punitive as opposed to making them more punitive. And so that passed. And needless to say, the prosecutorial community and the law enforcement community were not happy about this. They said that it was going to make it harder for them to catch people earlier in the pipeline, and it was going to basically make it so that we were all much more unsafe, and that crime was going to run amok. So in the 4 to 6 years that have ensued, every time something happened, people would come out and say, "Oh, see, this is the problem," and they were kind of using this as a talking point. Fast forward to now, some of our favorite people are behind this. Friend of the show, Jim Cooper in the Assembly has basically been a mouthpiece of
good old Jim.
Good old Jim. He's been a mouthpiece.
Shannon's
of
yoga partner, I believe.
Shannon's yoga partner, in fact.
Yeah.
And the goal here really is to walk back a lot of the protections that were offered by these previous propositions by making it now so that you actually can prosecute people for some of these offenses. And so it really is that's why I called it a clapback bill, because it really is in response to the fact that we've been moving in a less punitive direction, and now is going in the opposite direction. And so it basically you're allowed to sort of augment some of the penalties on these thefts. And I remember when I served on the Active Transportation Commission for the city of Sacramento, and we had a presentation about the bait bikes program, which is when police officers put out fake bikes, and if you steal them, they have trackers on them and they catch you. And the officer actually asked us on the record if any of us had bikes that were over, I think it's $950.
$950, yeah.
Because that is the threshold for it to become a felony.
Right.
As your bike ages, it goes down in value. And so the bikes that they did have that were felony bikes had depreciated in value and were no longer felony bikes. And so
now they're misdemeanor bikes.
They couldn't catch the people for the felonies like they wanted to. And he said with no sense of irony, and this really has stuck with me to this day, well, yeah, there's a lot of diversity in who we pick up. Everybody thinks we're just going to pick up brown people, but we pick up a lot of white people. We pick up men, we pick up women, we pick up old, we pick up young. They're all just basically, people experiencing homelessness.
There was a
sick.
That's not a lot of diversity here, guys. That means the people who are taking these bikes that you're just using to trap people are the poorest people who probably just need bikes. And these are extra bikes you have sitting around. Why don't you just give them to them? So that's kind of undergirding all of this, is this idea of wanting to catch these folks because we feel like any type of crime, it's the broken windows theory, right? Any kind of crime has to have a nip in the bud, otherwise it leads to general lawlessness.
Right.
There was a great piece in the Sacramento News and Review by this brilliant journalist, Dave Kempa, up-and-comer.
Oh, shit, here we go.
About the bait bike program a few years ago that
right.
actually also showed that the cops were bold-faced lying about picking up people of all races. It was very much mostly black and brown people, and also correct, you know, as people that previous offenses included anti-camping ordinance violations, which means they have nothing. Like, they literally are just trying to get by day to day.
And I think that up and coming, journalist, when he wrote that, that Kempa fellow, I think he was looking at the entire city and really kind of taking, advantage of the fact that the bait bikes program were often also concentrated in communities of color.
Right.
The officer they conveniently sent to report to the Active Transportation Commission represented Midtown, which admittedly is a more cosmopolitan and diverse area, and therefore is more likely to have a cross-section of the community. So he made it a point to say, he can't speak for the rest of the city, but the Midtown folks pick up everybody. They're just all people who are experiencing homelessness. And I was just like, really?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. The point has to be underscored that there still was a racial disparity, and as well as a class disparity in who was being picked up, but that in Midtown, it was, you were more likely to get a wider diversity of people in terms of their racial and ethnic background because it's Midtown.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there were people in South Sac. I mean, this dovetails well, I think, with a lot of what we're talking about, who, folks in like South Sac, who were like, hey, listen, we don't want you bringing these bait bikes down here. I don't want my son getting like tagged with a felony, right?
Right.
Just because he picked up a bike somewhere, So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, treating youth as adults, hitting them with felonies and things like that. Go, Sky.
I was just going to say, like, this bill, it's kind of blowing my mind, especially coming right out of all the international protests following the death of George Floyd.
Right.
Like, the national attitude has never been more like the cops are fucking up and we need to fix that, right? And so to come in right now with a bill that's like, oh, we need to get tough on crime is fucking bananas. So there's this, Dave, you shared this Politico article with us that kind of talks about this a little bit. And one of the parts that
my friend of the show, Jeremy White,
sticks out for me is this statement by the California Grocers Association, who are in favor of Prop 20. Says, California grocers, retailers, and small business owners have experienced a severe and troubling increase in serial theft, which is driving up costs and creating a hostile work and shopping environment for the customers and employees. Losses have been in the billions of dollars, right? And now, we've just been talking about how a lot of these arrests are for people shoplifting diapers or shoplifting baby formula. It blows my mind that even right now, we are primed. We're right in the right exact position to be hey, are harsher sentences on people who are experiencing extreme poverty and having a hard time surviving, is that the best way to go about it? If you are from the Grocers Association, it blows my mind that you wouldn't even consider being hey, what if we lived in a society where everybody could afford to buy diapers and baby formula? Maybe that would cut down on people coming into fucking Ralph's or whatever and shoplifting Huggies. People I don't know. I guess this is kind of a rant, but it just kind of blows my mind that we're back to oh, we need to lock people up for stealing diapers, rather than hey, we have a lot of money in the state. Why don't we make sure that everybody can afford diapers for their kids? It kills me that that's not even kind of on the table.
And there's another thing that really doesn't make sense given the fact that we're in a pandemic, I think that's what it's called. And we have this problem of social distancing, and we are trying to create laws that's going to put more people in jails, that's overcrowded,
Right.
and going to be more money to a cost incurred at the local level or the state level. And I think our revenues are down, like every budget is sort of strapped. So why now? I think
Right.
if you step back, because this is actually in response to 3 pieces of legislation. There's AB 109, there's Prop 47, and there's Prop 57. And AB 109 was really born out of, if you go back even further, that AB 109 came out in 2011. But if you go back to 2009, there was actually a court case. The Supreme Court actually told California, it's cruel and unusual punishment with the overcrowding conditions of the prisons. You are ordered to reduce it. And that was actually an appellate decision, and they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you have to reduce your prison population. So in response to that, that's why this legislation was created, AB 109, by Governor Jerry Brown, which was to reduce the prison population. And then with 47 and 57, those other propositions with that reform, we have been able to achieve decreases in the prison population. And
fairly significant decreases.
Sacramento Bee just had an article not too long ago, and every year around this time, Attorney General, they have their 2019 crime statistics, but study after study, the Public Policy Institute of California, they also have done a study that shows crime has been going down. So if you look at the Proposition 20, it was certified in 2017. Well, we just had Proposition 57 in 2016. So within a year, we didn't even have enough time and data really to collect and see how this is affecting, but we have seen that levels have gone down. And I'll send you all a link, because the most recent study that I looked at, it showed that violent crime had dipped down in 2019 to more than 50% less than the mid 1990s.
Right. And, you know, the crime actually in Jeremy's piece, I think he talks about some crime going up, but the crime that's going up, it's like, it's people stealing food. Like, do you think they want to steal food?
Right.
It's back to Flo's argument about, like, let's reimagine public safety. What are the determinants of crimes like this? And the determinants are hunger and poverty.
Right.
Need.
Right.
I mean,
Nobody's out there fucking stealing like bread or apples or whatever for funsies or because they like hate Safeway.
Love it.
They're fucking doing it because either they're starving, their kid's starving, their mom or dad are starving. Somebody needs the fucking food. And like the answer, like it blows my mind that we still are in this society that's like, we'll lock that person up for a longer period of time than it is to like make sure that all of these people have food in their stomachs and people stop stealing shit.
But another problematic piece of this bill is not that we want to lock them up. They want to collect DNA on misdemeanors.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So there are two things. I don't want to cut you off, Shannon. There are two things that really stand out to me about this. First, the California Grocers Association, I have not seen them in support of expanding EBT benefits or other things like that would allow people to be able to afford food in the same way, right? So they do come out, they do have a bill package that, but I'm like, why wouldn't you be the strongest supporter of the things that prevent this, as opposed to being quick to come on board with this? So that's first and foremost. It's sort of like, let's react to the problem, but not be part of the solution. The cynical part of me, though, is really clear that this bill comes out at this time, and the people who I think vote yes on this are people who are sitting at home saying, oh yeah, this is going to get worse. Mm-hmm. And all these people who can't afford rent, if we don't get these rental protections and other things like that, this is going to get bad. And they're going to be at my house with, weapons saying, clear out your refrigerator and give me your food. And they want to be able to prosecute these folks for things, right? They're anticipating that people are going to get desperate because they can see the handwriting on the wall because we're not taking good care of people in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
So
that's interesting. I don't consider them that smart to think that far ahead.
But it's also that's traditionally.
I think they're anachronistic. Yeah, I just think
that's a traditional way for the police to be applied, though, right? Is that when the poor get too out of hand and they start to threaten the people who are not poor, or the stability of people who are not poor, then the police get called in to put boots on the necks of poor people and knock them back down into a place where the haves are no longer being threatened by the have-nots.
Yes, what I'm saying though is that their mindset is simple as hell. They're looking at CompStat reports that are like, "Oh, this crime is up," and they're like, "Well, we better, buckle down against this XYZ crime." And like again, they're just not. It's anachronistic. It's a mindset that was popular in California 10 years ago, but it might as well have been popular 60 years ago, the way that most people actually view crime today in George Floyd's America and in 2020 California.
But they've been working on this for a while. I mean, they've been really trying to plant the seeds for this since the last one happened, but I think this is very much like Strong Mayor, right? Like, the mayor's going to tell us that he thought about this because of, what happened with George Floyd, and he wants to be more responsive to the community. But we all know he polled on this 8 months ago, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing is going to be true here, that they're going to come out and they're going to say, they're going to be able to tie this to recent events and say, since COVID has happened, we've had more shoplifting and our small businesses are hurting and blah, blah, blah. But we know they plotted this out beforehand. But I think their strategy on this is going to be to tie it to the desperation people feel and the fear that people are having that crime could get worse and it could be at their doors and we need to nip it in the bud because broken windows theory, right?
I think I think you're right about that.
I think that's the story that's going to be woven here is the why. But yes, you're absolutely right. This has been in the works long before COVID had a name and was a thing. But I think that's how it's going to be spun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so good that you guys are highlighting this so that we can continue to educate people and say, no, this is going backwards.
Yeah.
And this is, when you actually read the text of the bill, it talks about violent criminals and, they need this DNA collection so that they can solve crimes. And ironically, they say exonerate innocent people. So it makes you wonder.
Sure. Yeah, that is what the cops are super worried about.
That's precisely what they're doing.
That they're innocent
Central to their job.
Yeah, they're worried about that. That's a real concern. Is it okay if I move us along a little bit? Because we have a little bit to cover and we're burning some daylight here. So last week last episode, we talked a little bit about the outsized amount of the CARES Act federal funding that the county allotted to Sheriff Jones and the Sheriff's Department to pay their salaries and whatever the fuck. So there was just a Board of Soups meeting about that. That according to a great source it's a big clown show. According to a reputable source on this. Flo, you were kind of glued to this. Can you walk us through how this meeting went?
She was quoted in this piece, I believe.
You are.
Yeah.
You're quoting in like every piece now.
It's if I read an article today, if I don't see Flo or Shannon's name, I'm a little annoyed.
Yeah, I skip right to the end.
Yeah.
So this has been in the works for a while because the county has really not been transparent about their funding. And behind this is, I think a lot of Sacramentans now know the name Howard Chan, who is our city manager. But not many people know the name Navdeep Gill, known as Nav Gill, who is our county executive. And he is basically what Howard Chan is to the city, but for the county.
And he makes $400,000 a year. I just wanted to start off with that.
Yeah, and this is not the first time that he's hidden or misappropriated money in this way. So, there's the Mental Health Services Act money, which 3 years ago we had to call in Toby Ewing, who is over the MHS OAC, and say, you actually do have this money and it's there and you need to spend it or the state's going to take it back.
Can you acronym alert? MHSOAC?
Yes, absolutely. It's the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Committee, and they oversee the Mental Health Services Act funds, which is the tax proposition. I believe it was called 63 back when it was on the ballot a decade or so ago.
Okay.
And it is a millionaire's tax that allows counties to be able to have money for mental health services, including prevention and early intervention, and innovation fund to be able to try new things, as well as to be able to provide emergency and ongoing mental health services within the county. And Sacramento County was notorious for collecting these funds and doing nothing with them.
Doing dick with it.
When the city of Sacramento decided they wanted to do whole person care, they went to the county to get some matching funds, and the county said, we ain't got it. And so the irony of all of this is that this was Darrell Steinberg's bill when he was in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally brought people along to be able to say, like, no, you do have the money, give us the money, and they were actually able to get some.
Credit where it's due. That was like a pretty solid move by Stein.
It was a pretty solid move because, and I think we spend a lot of time criticizing the city, and rightly so. They are nowhere
love
near
to do it. I'm thinking about doing it, and I'm loving it.
I'm loving it.
The
Yeah,
county
also loving
makes
it.
the city look like a Batman villain from the Adam West version.
Yeah,
like,
they did.
The county looks like
Twirling the mustache.
Thanos, right? Like, compared to these Batman villains. Like, oh no, I'm gonna get you. Like, I mean, that's really how the city looks compared to them. And so what has happened is the county received $181 million in CARES Act funds. And this is the coronavirus relief funds, often known as CRF. And those funds are intended to be spent in a few ways. They have to be expended by December 30th of this year. They are supposed to be directly responsive to the impact that COVID-19 has had on our communities. And they are not specifically supposed to supplant things that were already in your municipality's budget. So because the city of Sacramento is over 500,000 people, they got an allocation of $89 million. And of course, the county of Sacramento has plenty of people. And so they got a $181 million allocation. And the county decided that they were going to spend the majority of that on law enforcement.
Which,
$22 million.
On Tuesday's episode, we cover in full. So feel free to listeners hop on that. Yeah.
So it's basically like $124 million between probation and the sheriff's department out of $181 million. So on Tuesday was the County Board of Supervisors meeting, and during it, Nav made a presentation about where the money went, and he basically admitted on the record that they were supplanting existing funding because law enforcement, in the frequently asked questions that came down from the Trump administration, they said that you can assume that public health or public safety expenditures will be approved for staffing. So they decided they were going to pull out $104 million and go ahead and do the sheriff's department, and then pull out another 20-some million dollars and do probation because their general fund revenues are down. Right. And then when public health came along, the people who should have gotten first dibs on the $181 million because we're in a pandemic, when they came along and said, here's what we need, we'd love to have $90 million to spend over this period of time, they were told, well, you tell us what you can spend by December 30th, because their initial ask was like, look, we know this is going to go for a while, so we need $90 million to do what we need to do. They came back with an ask of around $45 million, and they were told, no, I'm sorry, it's too late. You can ask for $1.8 million. And so they put in an ask for somewhere around that and didn't even get all of it because their overtime request was denied. Irony of all ironies, okay? So it gets better.
And can we? How much did our sheriff's department get in salaries from CARES Act again?
$104 million.
So
more than half of the money.
And then probation officers got another $20 million.
By the fucking way, I mean, we did cover this last week, but like, this is the sheriff who just got all this money, who, when the mask mandate came out and was like, hey, everybody's got to wear masks, his first thing was like, I'm not enforcing that.
Yeah. They literally have nothing to do with COVID.
Let's give this guy all the COVID money. That makes a fucking ton of sense.
This is also the same sheriff that out of their last budget used a wild amount of percents of overtime. Like this is
they do that by making arrests at the end of their shift too.
Right, so that someone has to sit and do a bunch of fucking paperwork.
Yeah.
Like it's total.
Well, and it's self-defeating, right? Because if you have to imagine that Nav Gill wants Sacramento to be done with the coronavirus pandemic as quickly as possible, right? Like if he's a community leader, probably ostensibly that is what he would like to see.
Hella bills.
But like the things that he's denying funding for are like, you know, our ability to test, the number of tests that we can do, paying people to conduct the tests and then to analyze the tests, and all of like our capability for that right now is super poor and underfunded. There's like this thing doesn't stop. Like all of these businesses that are going like fucking, I mean, there's a new one every day, right? Like right in my neighborhood, Shine Cafe went down like yesterday or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that is
Empress
a direct
Tavern
result
went down
of
today.
all of this shit being fucking underfunded. We can't test properly. We can't analyze the results properly or fast enough or do enough of it or whatever. And fucking, yeah, the fucking Sac County board was just like, yeah, well, fuck you guys. I'm going to give all of that money that you need for that shit to our fucking asshole sheriff.
Can I just say, like, there are very few friends of the capitalist on this show, but like, yeah, businesses are going under. But like, I think also, like, there's just the simple fact that like, there is blood on Nav Gill's hands. Like, people are dying because Nav Gill decided to put the money where he put it.
For a myriad of reasons, because again, I go back to the Mental Health Services Act money that was literally sitting in the county coffers and was getting ready to be taken back from the state if we didn't spend it. So to Skylar's question, if this were the first time, I would say, yeah, ostensibly, like, why wouldn't you want to spend this? But the question becomes, why is the state taking the money back unspent better than helping out with whole person care or doing anything with it?
Right.
We have people experiencing major mental health crises throughout this county, and you did nothing with it. So your guess is as good as mine. I'm going to, he is Thanos, and he's like, we need to call the population, and this is how we get rid of half of them, is by not supporting them in their basic needs. That's my theory at this point. Because
I love this comparison. I'm really into this.
He sat there and lied. I mean, he just lied on the record. So then all the public comment starts in, and we were like, that is a lie. Public health requested more money and was told no. And so after, an hour's worth of comments, the county supervisors turn back to Nav and say, so I want to hear from public health. Did you ask for more money? And so that's when Dr. Kassirier, hero of the week, stands up and says, we did, and we didn't get what we needed. And then her, the person, Dr. Bielenson, who is over the Department of Health Services for the county, and Dr. Kassirier is our county public health officer. So she's the person who issues the orders that says, please stay at home. You have to wear a mask if you're going to go out. We're sheltering in place. This is what is and is not open, etc. The Department of Health Services runs all of our health services for the county. And so Dr. Bielenson says, well, I don't know if we really need $44 million. I think we could do 20 or 25. And Dr. Kassirier, because he's like, we have what we need. And Dr. Kassirier said, that is not true. We do not have what we need. And we do need the full $44 million. And we need it post-stat. And so we've been trying to make it work with what you've gotten to us, but our staff are burned out and we need more money. And so I was just thinking of like all the people who were impacted by this, because to me, there shouldn't be anybody who is not upset about this. If you're behind on your rent or mortgage or afraid you might be, you should be angry about this, because LA County got $1.2 billion for coronavirus relief, and they spent millions of it on rent relief for people in LA. If you've been laid off or had your hours reduced and you maybe need some cash assistance, that's one of the things that could have come out from this.
Right.
If you're a business that needed support and didn't get it because the only place you could get support was from the city, and your business is in the county, or the city ran out of money money, you could have gotten more money from this pot of money from the county. Have you had trouble getting tested anywhere? Because if they had this money, there would be more tests that could have been available. Did
And
it
you
take
get your
12
response
days
in
to
time.
get your results,
Yeah.
right? If not, that's because the lab did not have enough money to be able to run these tests faster. They could do 300 tests a day. With more staff and more equipment, they could run more tests. Have you had trouble getting adequate PPE? Do you wish we had better transmission containment and contact tracing? All those things would have happened if we'd spent more than $10,000 on contact tracing. Do you
$10,000 out of 181 million?
Do you
And
just
also,
miss
That is a
some of the
fuck
things in
you
your
to
life
everybody who
and
lives
want
in
to
that
safely
county.
get them back? Because if you just miss things, right? If you're in that category of people who just want to take a walk and hug your friend and maybe have your schools reopen or any of those other things, you should be angry about this. And so this coming Tuesday at the County Board of Supervisors meeting, there will be a follow-up discussion about not only the CARES Act money, but also the budget in general as they're preparing to pass next year's budget. And we need to really demand that the money that's coming in go where it needs to go. And Dr. Sirier was clear on the record about the fact that they were told no. And what's happening is that NAV, and I think to a certain extent, Dr. Bielenson, are really trying to walk this back because they looked really, really bad on the record. They lied to the county supervisors because they did lie, and that's why they look like they were lying.
Yeah. Can we, first of all, yeah, so to Flo's call to action Tuesday, be a part of that loud minority that our local politicians like to talk about and gripe about, which, you know, we can dive into what the hell they're talking about there. And, you know, reach out and let them know exactly what you think about NAV and everybody else. And then two, Flo, and I think you were just driving at this, can we take a moment and consider who is getting blamed and thrown under the bus, not just on a county level, but on a state level on our failures regarding coronavirus?
Women of color.
What's that about? So at the
easy
state level,
scapegoats.
yeah. So at the state level, you know, obviously we've had these testing issues and all of these things. So we don't know if the stats we have day to day are even that accurate because there are some sort of numbers issues. Gavin Newsom, our governor, is claiming the buck stops with him, but he still has a fucking job. And Dr. Angel, who really, I mean, I personally trusted her a whole lot more than I trust his word. She has a late Sunday night, you know, leaving of her office. And then here on the county level, you have Dr. Bielenson, you have Nav Gill, and you have I guess our Board of Supes isn't doing anything yet, but it sort of is starting to feel like they're trying to throw Dr. What's her name? I'm sorry.
Dr.
Casserier under the bus and feeding and like he's my friend, but they're feeding Cap Radio some emails here. So what's going on?
So here is my understanding of what has happened. From my read of the article in Cap Radio and from my watch of yesterday's meeting, what happened here is that they were told you can't get $45 million. There is no internal process. So let's start there, okay? Let's start with how this works. The county has this money and they can spend it however they want to. The Board of Supervisors, and I'm going to make a judgment call here, very lazily said, we don't like to work. So Nav, give this money out.
You got
put some
this.
people together. You got this, right? And so Nav wants to give this money to the sheriff. So that's who he gave it to. And so they're now creating these little internal processes, but none of these are binding because they can spend the money on whatever they want to. So the County Board of Supervisors is the first ones who are responsible. They should have set out and said, give public health first dibs at this money. We'd like to see at least half of it go to them. And maybe we want to see another quarter of it going to housing or to something else that they care about. They should have put this in the buckets so that NAV was just administrating, not deciding. Because he's the county executive, he is not our electeds.
It is so disingenuous to imply that with $181 million, that immediately our first thought isn't most of this goes to our public health department.
Right.
Like claiming that they had to like file something. Fuck you.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's who has to fight for scraps. We don't know how the money is spent on the sheriff's department, right? But public health has put out now 3 budgets. So they put out their 90 million. They learned about, the time frame because everybody was really confused when this first came out. Even the city originally thought they just had to get the money out by December, but they could spend it whenever. And then it was clarified that the spending, the programmatic stuff has to be completed and spending done by December 30th. So that's what's happened. Everybody was getting clarifications, which is why the frequently asked questions came out. But then, on the record, she very much said, we need the $45 million. And so she sent a clarifying email out probably to her staff saying, look, we already got 1.5 and we're getting ready to submit for the 45 million because we were going to submit for 20 or 25 more, but the county board of supervisors said you need to get what you need. So we're going to submit again for the 45. And it is now being twisted as she never submitted it. This is the first time they've ever heard of it because everybody is trying to do a CYA, which is cover your ass. Because they were made to look like liars on the record because they are liars.
Because they are liars, right.
And so now these leaked emails are coming out, not quoting the entire email, but cherry picking what's been said and saying, oh, they never submitted it. This is a new $45 million. It's not. It's the same request that they put on the record at least a month or more ago asking for what they needed and were told no, and they were told to ask for $1.8 million so that NAV could sit on the dais and say, we gave everybody what they wanted. If they needed more, they should have asked. Because he can sit there and say, I have a request from public health for $1.5 million and we gave them $1.5 million. Yeah, you're omitting the fact that you told them no for their other requests.
Right.
So on Tuesday, everybody fire Nav Gill. That's your message.
That is your talking point. He's done this too many times and he's too smug about it. And then he got out there and said, well, this is embarrassing. I don't know how this happened. We never told anybody that they couldn't apply for money. We never told them. And I'm like, Nav, everybody in the county knows you're a bully. And if I can just take a moment and say, this is how systemic failures happen. This is a tool of, and white supremacy doesn't just have to be white people. It's a tool of how things are put together, that it's passive aggressive, that the onus is on you to have to prove something did happen as opposed to being able to say like, no, this is, what's all happening here. And what these conversations have, right? Don't write things down so there's no paper trail. It's all of these really manipulative ways that we go about trying to strong arm people into decisions. And so I just want to call out what's happening here. And it is real racial triangulation around the fact that COVID disproportionately impacts our Indigenous, our Black, and our Latino populations. That's who's being impacted. And so that's not who they want to spend the money on. That's not who they want to help. And that's not who they want to be perceived as helping. And so they've decided they're specifically not going to spend the money on it in that way. And they are really running the ringer around us in terms of the county of Sacramento. And I need everybody to get really angry about this. Tell your conservative friends that this is something we all should be able to get behind.
Should all be furious. It doesn't matter your political stripe.
For sure.
Hashtag fire Nav Gill for Tuesday. I think we're coming close to time here. And Alana, thank you for graciously letting us get very yelly in the last 25 minutes here.
We got to yell sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, there's stuff to yell about,
Yeah, but
I'm just glad to see Skylar's frown was turned upside down.
Thank you so much. It always is by this show.
But it was a real joy to have you on to talk about the Community Justice Collaborative. Anything we can do to sort of get the word out there, we'd be happy to. I'm really actually personally interested by the work with undocumented folks and folks, knowing their rights in that regard, because I believe that's an underreported story, and it's a very scary thing, because the people who are affected by this are afraid to tell their story because it behooves them to stay under the radar. So thanks for all you do. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, you're amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alana. We love you. You're doing good work, so really appreciate it. Got to bring nuance to these systems that exist while they exist, and so I really appreciate you for doing that work, because it's challenging work and it's hard work, though.
I'm not one for nuance, so I'm glad someone's doing it.
Well, guys, speaking of doing good work, I'm unemployed. I'm not doing any work.
How do you feel about the county, Skylar?
Oh, I'm loving it. I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm loving to think about it. So instead of doing good work, I am on Twitter all day, getting real mad and sad. Part of what my mission is for COVID-19 is to distill the internet down to just the most perfect of the takes. Just condense it right down. There's a lot of bullshit on the internet. It's gonna shock you to hear. But if we can kind of carve that away, right, like a sculptor, like imagine a piece of the internet is a piece of marble, and I am carving a beautiful statue out of this marble. And at the end, and it's taken me a while, right? I mean, that's why I, basically have to do this instead of work. But at the end, I will have shaped this beautiful lifelike statue of only the most perfect takes from the internet. So here's my ask, right? Because I'm doing this on my own. It's going okay. But I feel like there's probably a more kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a quicker way to do it, a more efficient way, a path to these perfect takes that have become the white whale to my Captain Ahab. Captain Ahab, if you will. That's a throwback there. Dave, please tell me if you have any information on where I can find more, or more sort of like a distillation of perfect takes. If there is such a place on the internet, I certainly have not come across it. I would love to know where I can find it.
Yeah, I think I can help you there. There is a portal out there in the internet that really is like the front doors of the main cathedral at Vatican City that will lead you to La Pietà of perfect takes.
This is exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm so happy to help here. This is Jesus in his mother's arms right here. A place called voicesrivercity.com. It's been around for 3 years here in Sacramento.
I've heard tell of such a place, but I always assumed it was just a legend.
Yeah, it exists. Yeah. Voicesrivercity.com. We've been doing the most perfect of takes for 3 years. This is Donatello level sculpting. We historically, we've done news, arts. We did the Follows the Money project, which we're still doing right now. I'm meeting with Saxnark tomorrow to discuss that a little bit more for a few local races. Of course, most recently, we have the iteration of the podcast, which everyone listening knows about. We also broke some news yesterday on Daryl Steinberg and Gill Duran getting schooled by Michelle Paraset. We've had a few community essays, and we plan to really amp that up again in the near future. So that's pretty exciting. We are on Facebook, Voices River City, Twitter at Voices River City, Instagram at Voices River City. Do not miss out on the Instagram account. It's very funny because never know what the hell Skylar's going to post on there. And it's usually some weird clips that aren't even necessarily on the podcast sometimes. And then, you know, we are on Patreon, patreon.com/voicesrivercity. You can pledge as low as $5 a month, and that's a beer at the bar that none of us are going to right now if we're being good about this COVID thing. There is some special content on there, a few little special episodes. Shannon and Skylar have each done one of their own. We're about to do one collectively where the four of us review Ladybird, which I don't know if you know this, but it was filmed here in Sacramento.
Yeah, no, if you were in Sacramento, you probably missed out on the fact that Ladybird was filmed in Sacramento.
Yeah, it's not
like
on a secret. It's a secret.
People were really subtle about that, as I remember.
Yeah. So you can tell we're going to be very positive in that one. I think it'll be fun though. I think we're on YouTube. You can watch our nice little faces as opposed to just listening to our weird little voices. And then I am on Twitter at YouKnowKempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find me at Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
I am Shan N.D. Stevens.
And Alana. Oh, sorry, Flo.
And I am
Oh.
I am at Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
Alana, how can we find you on the internet?
You can go to www.communityjustice.us.
I love it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you for all you do, and we're super excited to have you on and talk about it. Flo, you look like you want to say something.
I do. I just want to lift up that, we are reaching our 3rd day of 100+ degree weather. And so that means that the Office of Emergency I can't keep these acronyms straight. Emergency Services, there we go. It's like, OES is going to have some cooling stations that are going to be available around the county. We don't know the location of the one in Folsom, but I did retweet from Sam Greenlee the locations that he contacted to find out where they're going to be for I guess the next few days.
Sam Greenlee is the executive director of Alchemist CDC, but he's also just a community member he's
a great community member who cares a lot about this. And one of the things that he actually posted about is asking if you happen to have a business or a private residence location and you are willing to host a cooling station of your own to be able to supplement the only 6 or 7 that are going to be throughout the county. He is currently crowdfunding supplies for that. We're guessing it's going to cost about $200 per station to be able to have a tent. Hopefully you have maybe a hose or something that we can hook up to like your water supply, or we can buy a hose for you to be able to have some misters, and then a cooler that will be able to hold water and Gatorade and other things like that. And so if you'd be willing to participate, please go to the Facebook post. I think they were still looking for another $160 for the people who have volunteered to have some cooling stations that might be available on either private residences, or if you have a business that would be willing to have a cooling station available. This is a really important, justice issue for our unhoused folks when it's incredibly hot outside, to be able to stay hydrated and to stay cool, because we do have heat-related deaths that occur when the temperature reaches the triple digits. And honestly, the threshold of having to have 3 100-degree days is
way too high.
It's way too high.
Well, tomorrow's like 109, right? Or
Exactly.
I guess today.
Right.
Yeah, 109, which is
and I think
high even for us.
I know we're wrapping, but it's really, I think, important. An important piece of this conversation is that the Office of Emergency Services defines this as severe weather emergency as a heat index over 105 degrees for 3 consecutive days, accompanied by night temperatures that are 75 degrees or more. And we do not meet that threshold in Sacramento, which is why they don't activate these cooling centers ahead of time.
Yeah.
So my point being, some work needs to be done around changing the policy that is used by the Office of Emergency Services, because this happens every fucking year. And it's always something where like community folks and activists are getting out there and we're saying you need to open these cooling centers because people are going to die. And at the very last minute, you know, stuff opens up, but it's not enough. It's never enough.
Yeah. And listeners, we just want, sorry, Shannon, but I just want listeners to know, like, this is a near and dear issue to us on the show because these are Shannon's guests at Mary House, and these are the people that she knows and loves and serves. And it's not just an abstraction. These are real people that, you know, we know.
And as you know, and because so many businesses are shut down right now, there's not even the possibility to sneak into certain places because of COVID-19. Normally, you know, our libraries would be open to be able to let people in, and some of our other public facilities, you know, where people could, you know, potentially get in without harassment and be able to cool off. So this year in particular, if you are willing to, you know, engage in this work or support this work, please go to Sam's Facebook post. It's Sam Greenlee, GREENLEE, and see how you can help out.
I'll throw that in the show notes as well.
I wonder where we could have got some relief money for this issue.
You know, I wonder because, you know, again, COVID responsive, we could have, you know, maybe had money for tents and things like that if only the sheriff didn't need it more for his COVID efforts.
Interesting.
What do you guys think the odds are that Tuesday Nav comes walking out in like a purple tank top and like one really big gold glove with a bunch of jewels in it?
I really hope that that's his Halloween costume.
It would be
that
fantastic.
Would make me incredibly happy.
It'd be in really good taste.
It would. It would.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. Alana, thank you again for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
Yes.
To everybody listening, we love you. We want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And stay the fuck away from me.
Hell. All right.
That's right.
Let's get out of here.
Bye, everyone.